An age ago, the beating heart of our people was a king who knew only victory. He wanted nothing more than an honorable death on the battlefield. Yet, none could match him, and so he wandered the earth, becoming lost in time and tide. Then we too lost our honest purpose, while silk-clad men sat upon the throne. But tremble now, all cities that lay under the stars, for out of the shadows and mists of the land of promise, our courage has been rekindled, our heart has returned, and the world will burn.
All right, how's everybody doing tonight? I wanted to do this quick live stream because we now have a countdown of 24 days until CROM the Destroyer opens. If someone could give me a shout out in the chat just to make sure you can hear me. I know there's a couple of people there already. I'd like to say hello to everybody, and I'll put some CROM the Destroyer in the background, some art, and I have some new art to show you tonight, although this stuff that I'm putting on the slideshow is just going to be the old stuff for the moment, but we will get into some new art. And as I said, looks like, okay, just one second. Sounds like everybody can hear me fine. That's great, great. I did a live stream, in case you didn't know, about a year and a half ago. I did a live stream where I forgot to add myself to the stream, and I talked for like an hour and decided to answer questions after that. And, you know, being professional, I talked to myself while everybody else waited for an hour. So I'm always making sure that everybody can hear me in the chat. So tonight, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about CROM the Destroyer and its background. And I want to talk about some very specific Conan stories that I want to draw off of as inspiration for CROM the Destroyer. And I've already talked about one of the, well, I would say the most influential, I would say the best Conan story for Robert E. Howard. Now I'm talking only Robert E. Howard Conan stories here. I know there's plenty of others, and there's plenty of others to draw from, but I'd like to draw from there. That is to say, to look at what he built off of the Celtic mythology that I myself was exposed to as a child. And it seems like he and I were probably exposed to the exact same material because those books were published in the late 1800s. So he would have been looking at them fresh as a boy. Basically, the big tome of Irish mythology from Lady Gregory and a few others that had spectacular art in them. And that's what was exposed to me as a kid. And I'm just, you know, I lived 100 years prior to when I actually, you know, came to this earth, because the places that I lived in was so rural, so country that, yeah, we were at the very least 50 years behind, at the very least 50 years behind, if not 80, 100 years behind everybody else, to say the least. We lived in a very backwards part of North America. My mother growing up, both my parents actually growing up, they lived in a section of the country where there was like nobody had running water. Nobody had a car by any means. It was just horse and wagon. And, you know, there was no indoor plumbing, nothing like that. It was just, you know, horses and everything else. So that's how my parents grew up. So, you know, when I grew up, we weren't very far off from that, even though at the same time, I had a personal computer. So it was very, very strange. But anyway, I'm just saying that I was exposed to a lot of these early stories. I was given these kinds of stories to read, ones that were published in the 1800s, things like that. Anyways, so the Robert E. Howard stuff, again, I like it because it draws off that Celtic myth that I myself just loved growing up. So I try to take the characters that he used to inspire Conan and recreate a Conan like character from that inspiration of those Celtic myth with those mythology. I probably pronounced them wrong, but there are central figures like Conor Mór and Lou of the Long Hand, also Oisin or Oisin, son of Fan. A lot of these characters that I think, and I know some of them went into Conan, but I would say went into the creation of it. But anyway, the Robert E. Howard stories that I really like, I say the best, would probably be the Tower. What is it? The Scarlet Tower? Off the top of my head, I'm blanking right on it. I think it's the Scarlet Tower. But anyways, I would say, and I have said on a stream before that that um, I think that that is probably the central part of it. Is probably the best horror story that I have read. In 90%, I would say it's better than 90% of all the horror stories out there. But one of the ones I think that really inspired this character, or how this character is expressed in Crom the Destroyer, is Beyond the Black River. I think there's several names for Robert E. Howard's stories, each of them. Anyways, but it's basically Conan's older in life. He's certainly not become a king yet, but he's um, defending the border, which is very much in the south, almost like I would say it's described as a almost African area where the Aquilonians are trying to push into the jungle to make new land for themselves. And the Aquilonians are basically the medieval French. So they're pushing into this area. Now, when I first read this story, I kept on starting it and putting it down and starting it and putting it down because I didn't like it. And that's why I have a hate love relationship with this story. And the reason why I didn't like it was because it's so confining when you begin. He begins in the jungle, and everything is just like pressing in upon you with his descriptions. And to me, I'm someone who likes wide open spaces. So that's why I love the visual depiction of Conan and the world that he's in within the Marvel comics, because you have that wide open background area almost all the time. So anyway, um, within that story, again, at the first of it, I always started it and put it down because I didn't want to read anymore because I felt so confined. It's almost claustrophobic within the jungle setting that he gives, and there's so much unknown there. But when you get into the second part of the story, and I remember first time I came across it and actually finished it, you realize that that was deliberately done in order to show you the difference between barbarism and civilization. And Conan is sort of in the middle because you have the Picts, who are this barbarous tribe, and you could compare them to the Picts of Europe, but usually the Picts that he describes within his stories, Robert E. Howard, they seem to be Native American Indian. So he's describing this barbarous people, and at the same time, you have the Aquilonians, who are much too soft to be there. They're the symbols of actual civilization, whereas Conan's in the middle, because Conan works for the Aquilonians, but at the same time, he's just as barbarous, if not more than the Picts themselves, because he can hunt them down in their own territory. So it's a beautiful story to put those two things in perspective, because he picks up I don't remember the name of the character right off the top of my head, but he picks up a companion right at the very first of the story. And it almost seems near the end of the story that this story is following the companion and not Conan himself. But there is a switch near the end, which goes back to Conan. But this character, who basically is from southern Aquilonia, so it's a very soft part of, again, medieval France, is the basic idea of where this is. possibly you might think of it as part of, I'm not sure, Spain, but I would say medieval France. So he's in this area, he's from this area, and he thinks of himself as a woodsman. He thinks of himself as someone who likes to be out in nature, but then he gets into this area and he sees true barbarism. He sees how civilized he is, especially with himself next to Conan. And it is that play off of civilization and barbarism that really hits this character hard. And I mean, it just knocks him on to his knees at one point. And I won't spoil the story for anybody if you haven't read it before. It's a beautiful story. Again, if you can get through it, because at the first, again, it's claustrophobic. But hitting that character so hard with the barbarism that he's confronted with is really, again, this is why I have a love-hate relationship with that story. And it's so good. But I think a lot of people view the ending of the story much different than I do, because the ending of the story is that the Aquilonians have to retreat to a stronghold because these tribes, the Pict tribes, are pushing in, and they're slaughtering some of the people. So they have to retreat. And at the end, Conan says that, you see, and he's talking to other Aquilonians when they're safe. He says, civilization is not the norm. He says, barbarism is the norm for people. Civilization is something you built, and it doesn't belong here. And he says that, at some point it's going to fall. At some point, your civilization is going to fall, and there's going to be nothing but barbarism left. And a lot of people take that to be Conan's and Robert E. Howard's statement, basically. Just let me bring up this 1 second here. Basically saying that there is something much more noble in the barbarism rather than in the civilization. But I don't take it that way, because again, I always view Conan as he eventually becomes the king of Aquilonia, and he defends his people beyond the ideas of barbarism. He defends them. He's given several chances where he's almost dethroned, and the people give him a chance. They say, listen, you're a barbarian. Go. Take as much money as you want. Go back and be a barbarian. You don't owe any loyalty to these people. You're not really their king because you're a barbarian. And he says, no, I'm not abandoning these people. He won't abandon their civilization. He won't. So I always view Conan through that lens of where he eventually ends up. And I would call him a lawful good king at the end of when he is the king of Aquilonia. So I picture him in that sense. And I would view the ending of this story as being the Robert E. Howard story of Beyond the Black River, as being Conan saying that, listen, you people who build this civilization, and it's a great, great message for us today. He's saying, unless you keep up the civilized part of what you've built, it's going to descend back into barbarism. And no matter what you try to do, if you can't keep that civilization up against this barbarism from within and from without, you're going to fall. It's going to be destroyed. And again, I think that's a great message for today, because that's what we see around us in the culture today. But the thing is that I draw on this to write CROM the Destroyer in some way, because we have a character, again, very similar to Conan, built upon the same foundations of the Celtic myth. So you have him, this character. We begin the story. He's called King. They call him King because he is a king. He's the leader of this army. They're on the battlefield. He's their king, and he gets into a spot where he basically loses everything. And he has to choose between, once again, barbarism and civilization. And it's a catch-22 choice that he has to make, because in order to try to regain the civilization that he has some investment in, some stock in, he needs to fight in a barbarous way once again. He needs to steep himself in barbarism in order to regain civilization. And again, it's a catch-22, and it's the, I would say, the dynamic of this story, which is a very much a conflict, internal and external, to this character. Again, we call King, at the first of the story. So this is what the story is about. The underlying one of the underlying themes of the story, anyway. So I wanted to tell everybody about that, just because it's so much ingrained, again, in the underlying part of the story. So this is what you're going to get, uh, as the foundation of the action, and as the foundation of what is going on with the character motivations. So again, I always like to delve into these bigger ideas with my stories, but not shove it in your face, and not as, giant word balloons and dialogue. No, it's the action. You're going to get, 75% of the book is just straight up action, if not more. And you're going to get the character development and the underlying themes of all of this, the trying to survive and the preservation of civilization through the use of basically barbarous intent, or his barbarous loosing of his barbarous nature, so that he can defend it, and all this kind of thing. So again, there's a paradox there that he needs to work through. So I like to touch on those ideas. And I just wanted to talk about that because, I very rarely get to talk to people about my Conan stories. And this is part of the reason why I'm writing this story, because I very rarely get to talk about these things to people. And I'm glad everyone comes and listens to me with my live chats, and is hopefully going to pick up Crom the Destroyer. Again, just wanted to let everyone know that we're going to be opening. I originally thought I was going to open on the 4th of July, but I switched that to the 30th of June, which is the Friday before the 4th of July. So it was because, again, I was looking on Memorial Day, and very few people were actually online on the holiday. So I figured we'll do it before, on the Friday, give everybody time. And hopefully on Friday, you have some money so you can pay for Crom the Destroyer and go out and buy it for yourself and see what this story is about. So we can have a great long weekend. So this is why we have 24 days left until the opening of Crom the Destroyer. So I'm going to go through the chat, starting at the very beginning. I'm going to say hello to everyone at first, just a blanket hello, so that I can get right into any questions that you have. And if you have further questions, please just post them in the chat, as long as you put a question mark after it to give me some indication that the question is for me and you're not discussing it with other people. So going to go through that. And then I do, as I said, just had one a new page from Jim O'Reilly that I wanted to share, or part of it anyways, which is just beautiful art. And I'll do that in a little bit after I get some questions answered. So again, I want to say hello to everyone. Seems like everyone is having a great time in the chat. Let's see here. We have a lot of new faces and old faces. Poofy's here. We got Vikings here. Let's see if we have any questions. So I'm going to do the old school Zach thing. Scrolling down. I don't think this first question is for me, but what is best in life? Yes. Okay. Everyone can answer that for themselves. We know Conan's answer to that, or at the very least, the movie version of Conan. So, and as someone had answered the question in one of my live streams a while ago, they said to see the comic prose of the mainstream driven before me, and to hear the lamentations of the women. That's what we hope to do with our books like Crom the Destroyer. So let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. I like the concept. Hail the Iron Age. Oh, yes. Very much. I forgot to mention. I did mention this last week. I wrote a side story to Crom the Destroyer. It is basically a fallow part of the story, between chapters. So, because I take all my books and I separate them into chapters, which are basically 22 pages. And I do that so that someday, if I want to publish them as floppies, I will do so. Which in the Valiant Heroes, I published those ones as floppies on the campaign itself. But this one's one story. It's continuous. So you have 3 chapters, and between these chapters, I wrote a small story. It's just a text story in the in the tone and style of Robert E. Howard. And I submitted that to Iron Age magazine, and they said, yes, we want to publish this for Iron Age magazine number 2. So Iron Age magazine number 1 just finished up a little while ago, a couple of weeks, I think. It's Indiegogo campaign. I put the link for it in the description along with the sign up page for CROM the Destroyer. So if you want to go check out what Iron Age magazine number 1 looks like and possibly order that, again, link is in the description. And we are, again, going full steam ahead with Iron Age number 2. My story has already been chosen. It is going to be one of the major parts of Iron Age 2. And again, it will give you some other kinds of story about CROM the Destroyer world. I love doing this kind of thing. It's because I am putting out this graphic novel, and I like to concentrate as a writer. Anyways, I love this medium of graphic novel comics with this visual medium, and I will use the visual medium to its greatest extent to tell the story. But when I get to a text story, like the one that it's called Morning Light, which is and morning spelled as mourning, as in mourning for the dead. So it's Morning Light. Um, when I get to the text story, I get to use that Robert E. Howard technique of describing things in a way just to a point where it tickles your imagination and allows it to run wild. And since you don't have that visual, not as much anyways, I am going to publish just a couple of pieces of art with it, some spectacular art from this beautiful artist that I ran across, and I posted some of those on Twitter. Just let me read this up one more time. But yeah, since I can do that, and I'm going to do that with the story. It's going to be much more of a, again, run away with your imagination. Just give you just enough to have, like, the Scarlet Citadel, just enough to scare you, just enough to thrill you, just enough to draw you deeper into the story. That is how much I will describe things just enough. Again, I love playing with those kinds of mediums and being a storyteller in different ways for the same kinds of story, because they're both in the CROM the Destroyer world. So again, Iron Age, yes, very much hail the Iron Age, because we are part of the Iron Age here, and we will be with our CROM the Destroyer story in Iron Age magazine number 2. So, and hail Comicsgate as well. Let's see, scrolling down. RJ, are you familiar with Kuhulayan? That's how I pronounce it. Hopefully I'm getting it right. Yes, Kuhulayan. Um, um, it is one of the major story arcs, if you want to call it that, within the books that I have and I grew up with. Lady Gregory does a very if you get the compiled works of her, it's a big tome the size of a dictionary. It covers Kuulayan and his, again, story arc, because all of these Celtic myths are very much very short stories. Sometimes they're like 2 paragraphs, sometimes they're 5 pages, sometimes they're 12 pages, but they're all just short stories, and they're all collected together, usually within a Irish mythology collection, which you can get, which again, I would stress getting those ones that were published usually within the late 1800s, early 1900s. Those are be your best bet if you want to go back to the authentic telling of those stories, unless you can read Irish Gaelic, which I can speak a little bit, but I can't read it very well. So again, let's see, scrolling down. Someone says, I know that Gaul used to be an old name for France. Yes, true. So let's see. Great art. Thank you. But that is Jim O'Reilly. He has this beautiful art. Actually, there's some, mostly Jim O'Reilly here. Some is Nick Axe. He did the cover, and I'll show you later on, probably next week, some more of Nick's art, because he's also doing art for this book as well. Because we have uh, Mike Gustovich, again, who is an old Marvel and DC hand, who worked on pretty much every old superhero that you heard of. He was a penciler and an inker for Marvel and DC. He's doing the inking for this book. And he did work on Conan the King for Marvel. So yeah, he's going to tie everybody's everybody's pencils together with his inking style, his beautiful inking style, which is superb. So we got a lot of artists working on this. The other artist that did the Harpy poster, because that's a poster that is a pinup poster that you can get with the campaign. Oh, what is this name off the top of my head? I knew it last week when I was doing my live stream, and I can't remember it for the life of me. He used to do what is it? Fantasy independent comics with ElfQuest. He used to do ElfQuest, if I remember correctly, and he also, I think that's him, because there's so many artists that I'm working with right now. He also used to do some Ghost Rider for Marvel. So again, got some great artists here. I see Sound Engraver has given me a super chat. Thank you very much, Sound Engraver. You should post a question with your super chat and let everybody know. Well, I'll just let everybody know since you didn't post anything with it. Sound Engraver has her own YouTube channel. If you want to go and look at, we'll say, culture war kinds of issues, according to someone who is inclined towards the musical, because she is very much analyzing music, and that's her wheelhouse. So you go on over and take a look at the Sound Engraver's channel. I think Sound Engraver is, correct me if I'm wrong, Sound Engraver, because I don't want to put out any kind of false information, but she's connected to Professor Geek. I think that actually she's his fiance, if I'm remembering correctly. So, great connection to Professor Geek there. Anyway, just to let everybody know. So go on over and give Sound Engraver a subscribe to her channel if you feel like that's the kind of stuff you want to delve into, more the musical side of this whole culture war and everything that we're going through. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. I have this is a great treat to end the day. Hello, RJ. I appreciate what you do here on YouTube and am excited for CROM. Thank you very much. Oh, I forgot. I actually, yeah, I'm a little bit inept when it comes to sometimes using the YouTube system and all that it has to offer. So I can actually figure out how to now put these up on the screen for everybody. So here we go. I'll put that up when I read your comments. Let's see. Viking says barbarians are indeed at the gates. Yes, indeed. That's why I think this story is relevant for today, and that's why I think it's taking off like it did. As I said, I always thought that I would do the superhero stuff and it would take off, and then I would do the Conan stuff as a backup, and it would be the other story that I would be doing. But it seems like it might be the opposite, because there's so much attention and hype for Crom the Destroyer. People are just eating this up. I think one of the reasons why, and again, Professor Geek just touched on this in a video last week or earlier this week, talking about the lack of fathers and the lack of masculinity. And it's something that I touch on in my videos a lot. But yeah, this masculinity, true masculinity, needs to be shown to people, and people are hungry for that. And that's why I want to, in part, I mean, I'm not preaching to anyone, but I want to, in part, present that dynamic that I talked about at the first, the dynamic of barbarism versus civilization, because it helps understand what true heroism is. That's what my channel is all about. It's about being a hero, and I think that Conan is a hero. He's a flawed hero, but he's a hero nonetheless. And if you look at, again, if you go back to stories like the Roy Thomas stories, they always declare him to be a hero. And as I was talking last week about one of the stories, which was the Slithering Shadow, it talks about him in terms of how he would never do this he would never abandon this woman who he escaped this battle with, even though there was reason for him to do so, all this kind of thing. So he does have heroic traits, but I want to delve into that in my own way, in showing the heroism of my character King through that tension between barbarism and civilization. So yeah, I think that these stories are very much needed, and the strong male, I don't know, role model, or just presentation of a hero. It's not even a role model. I don't know. I'm not putting it out as a role model, as in you should go and be like this person. I'm putting it out as, okay, here's a representation of the reality of manhood, in a way that you're not going to see within current mainstream entertainment in any way. And I talked about this in my recent videos for my Saturday videos a lot. And we'll probably be talking about that in my Saturday video coming up again. All right, I got another super chat. I can't believe I'm getting super chats. Yes, I can get super chats. I just I don't stream enough for people to remember the fact that I can get super chat. Thank you very much. Orbital Bacon. Oh, Optimus Prime. I didn't notice what your avatar was. Very, very nice, Optimus Prime. Let's see. I really appreciate your thoughtful videos and your passion for good stories. Keep up the great work. Thank you very much. Again, I am exactly what you're saying. I'm sharing my appreciation for great stories. I'm sharing my passion for the appreciation for great stories with you people, because you all have that same passion and appreciation for great stories, I think, as well. So and we need an outlet for that, because you're not going to get it within mainstream entertainment right now. So let's see. I'm going to show one of the other um, things that I have up here for art. And again, trying to scroll back to where I was, because I have to actually go off screen in order to do that. Puffy says, what is your opinion on gray morality? Um, I know that I have a very, we'll say, most people think of my way of thinking as childish, or I'm a simpleton. You can make that determination for yourself, but I would say there is no such thing as gray morality. There's only black and white. You just have to look close enough, because you mix black and white together, you get gray. So that's where you get gray from. You mix black and white together. So all you got to do is look close enough, and there's black and white, and that's the foundation of it. So I don't like the idea of gray morality. It very much bleeds into situational ethics, and I don't think there is such a thing as situational ethics. That is to say that this is right for this situation and wrong for that situation. No, there's a right and wrong. That's it. Um, it's part of reality. That's what I'm always going on about reason, logic, reality, the structure of the universe, and the structure of the human nature as it fits within all of this. And I play back into ideas of natural law, which is talking about the constitutive aspects of human well-being, and human well-being not only of the individual but of the societies that we build. Yeah, that's all based on ideas that there is a fundamental reality within our universe and within the greater system of reality, that is right and wrong. Something is ultimately right and ultimately wrong, where there is no gray. So let's see, scrolling down, let's see. Orbital Bacon says 100% true, for Viking. Seems we are in the weak man make hard times phase. Indeed, indeed. Hopefully, we'll be pulling out of that. You know, when I was studying these ideas that I'm always talking about on my channel within university, and this was, 20 years ago at least, I didn't think that we would get to this culmination point of pushing back against this until around 2050. That was my estimation. It's sad to see it come, but I'm glad to see it come at the same time, because it needed to be here to push back against what I saw at that time and everyone else is beginning to see now. And then that's why I rail against this stuff so much, because I studied these ideas in the late 1990s, early 2000s, at university level, and they were there. This critical theory and all these kinds of destruction of Western civilization, it was all there. It was all laid out at that time. It was just that most people didn't see it. Everyone thought I was crazy for pointing these things out. But people are now finally beginning to see these things. Yeah. So, scrolling down, people saying hello. How you doing? I'm doing great. Just to let everyone know. So, what are your thoughts on the various live action adaptations of Robert E. Howard's works. Live action adaptations. Someone told me last week in this live stream, I don't know if they're here or not because I don't remember who it was off the top of my head, about Primal. And I didn't know what they were talking about, but I have since educated myself. I haven't seen the show, but I've been looking around at what the show is and all that kind of stuff. It's very much a Robert E. Howard, This Is Conan world without it being Conan, which is kind of like what my story is, but in a different way. But yeah, live action interpretations, again, it's the same as with the novels for Conan the Barbarian. If you look at DeCampi and if you look at Robert Jordan, you look at all the other people who have done these novels for Robert E. Howard, it's the same thing. They give their own take on it. Some are much closer to, I think, what Robert E. Howard actually wanted. Some are much farther away. Um, I don't know too much about um, various live actions besides, of course, the three attempts to make a movie. The first two movies actually were books before they were movies. So especially, I think the second, which is Conan the Destroyer, which is the second Conan movie for Arnold Schwarzenegger, that was Robert Jordan. I can't remember who wrote the first one for Conan the Barbarian. That was very much not Conan. I mean, he was a visual representation of Conan, but his backstory and all that kind of stuff, that was a little bit not him. Conan the slave, no. But at the same time, everybody's taken liberty to tell their own Conan story, and I do get some things out of it. But again, I like to go back to original source material. While I generate ideas by watching these other things, live action adaptations. Again, the Jason Momoa Conan the Barbarian movie, I think that was him in that movie. I mean, I saw it, but I couldn't tell you anything about it right now. I mean, usually I remember a movie fairly well enough so I can give you a plot summary. I have no clue what the plot summary for that movie was, even though I've seen it at least once. So, there's your short answer to that question, I guess. Let's see. Viking is saying, congratulations on Iron Age. Thank you. Again, my story, my side story for Crom the Destroyer, that's going to be published in Iron Age magazine #2. Then let's see, scrolling down. Who's the gal with the horns? Orbital Bacon says. And are there more characters like her? Yes and no. I won't spoil too much of the story. She's one of the main characters within the story. She takes up almost the antagonistic center, without giving too much away again, of the first and second chapter. But again, she does have, again, the harpy characters that you see within some of this art are her minions, I guess you want to call it that. So yeah, there are, and they do get transformed slightly by events that occur. So yeah, there's other types of these characters, not plays off of what she is exactly, but there are different kinds of I don't want to make the character over and over again. She's not one of, she's unique. That is, I'll put it that way. She's unique, although she does have others like her trying to do the same things as she does. So that's the backstory for this character. Funny enough, I should give this character a name, but since she's so much, I don't know, it just took off, this character, because it's Jim O'Reilly that created that character, saying, hey, why don't we use this as a visual? And I said, yeah. This was at the very first when I was talking to Jim. Great artist, Jim O'Reilly. Just want to give him a shout out. He was here last week. It's beautiful art that you see mostly on the screen. But yeah, he came up with the concept for that character, said, let's use this. And this was before I even began to write the story. And I said, definitely, we're going to do that. And the thing was that I wrote, the chapters for the book which make up the story. And I've never given that character a name. I really haven't. She's just she's just who she is. She's a presence unto herself. Uh, so let's see. I'll do this one more time. I'm going to catch up on some of these comments. I'm very long winded. Everyone should know that by now if you're here. Da, 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 da. Let's see. Scrolling up, because every time I do this to re up the art, I have to go back to my place. Let's see. Scrolling down now. See, Jolly Green is saying hail the chat. Well, thank you very much. And hail to you, Jolly Green. Have you read Denny O'Neill's? Let me see. I got to put this on the screen. Run of the question. If Denny O'Neill's run of the question, I don't recall which run Denny O'Neill's question was. Was that in the 1990s or the 1980s? Because if it was in the 1980s or 90s, I would have read it. But if I'm thinking Denny O'Neill's question would probably be just scratching at the back of my brain in the 1970s. So I might not have. I certainly don't remember it. Question has never been my favorite character. I've basically read the question as a part of everything else that was going on within the universe at the time the character was there. So I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I would have to see covers for that book in order to figure that one out. Let's see. Jolly Green says, oops, darn. Sorry. As I said, I'm technologically inept. I keep on trying to click on things, and it makes my chat feed just jump all over the place. Jolly Green says, cool art, well done. Yes, Jim O'Reilly, Nick Axe, Mike Gustovich. Who else we got? We got several others. I got to write these down so that I have them on a piece of paper next to me when I do these live chats, because they're all their names just go out of my head. Scrolling down. Yes, I was talking about ElfQuest. One of the artists that I was talking to originally to do the art for this book was one of the artists for ElfQuest, not the original artist, but the one that was in the late 80s, early 90s. I can't remember if he's the same fellow who did the pinup poster, the one with the harpies in it, because I know that he worked for Marvel doing Ghost Rider during the early 90s, but I can't remember. Again, there's so many artists. Shout out to John Chin. Go check out his YouTube channel if he's still doing. I don't know if he's still doing the live streams or not, but I got in touch with Don. He is an old indie comics producer from back in the day, from the 80s and 90s, and he got me in touch with so many great artists, because basically I took him. I said, you know all this stuff, and I'll try to back up a little bit. I hired Don to write a backup story for Thomas Valiant #2, because Don does parody comics, and I wanted him to do a story which was basically like an old Plastic Man story. And I'm not the most humorous person in the world. I have my moments, but that's about it. So so Don did some work for me. We'll be seeing that in the future. Actually, Mike Gustovich is probably going to be doing the art for that as well, doing the pencils for that. It's the backup story. It's going to be a 22-page backup story to Thomas Valiant #2, which Renzo is beginning within a week, I think. And so, I got in contact with Don. He got me in contact with all of these old artists that still want work, but just can't find it anywhere. So, I'll have to say that some of these old artists are much more expensive than you would get new artists for, but experience, you pay for experience sometimes. So I'm doing that. I want beautiful art with my stories, simplistic and visually stunning. Simplistic as in it's not muddied. You can tell where things begin and end, and you can see that this is a clear picture that you can take something from while reading the story at the same time. So shout out to all my artists. Sound Engraver says, thank you, RJ. Yes, you are correct. Professor Geek and I are engaged. Well, it's great to hear. In fact, I'd give you way better super chats. We're on a tight budget. Don't you worry about that, Sound Engraver. You probably give me more super chats than anyone else here, and tips and everything else. Thank you very much. And not only congratulations, but well wishes from me for both you and Professor Geek, because we need more people walking down that aisle if we want to save our civilization. Let's see here. Scrolling down, scrolling down. No, I got a George says, I want to read this comment here, even though it's not much, it's not a question. Conan didn't sell out to be king, it was just thrust upon him. Didn't set out to be king. No, well, at the same time, excuse me, I would say he did set out to follow that prophecy, which I can't remember. I don't remember if it's just a Roy Thomas thing. I don't think it's just Roy Thomas. Sometimes I get the Conan stories confused, but within certainly the Roy Thomas way of looking at it, there was the prophecy when he was a young man that he would eventually become a king, and he always had that in the back of his mind. And it was sometimes a joke, sometimes something he pursued openly, but at the same time, never his true focus. So I would say that that does play into some of the story, um, even within Beyond the Black River. Um, the story that I was talking about earlier, when him and his companion have just a moment of rest, he tells him a lot about himself and about the fact that someday he may be a king. He doesn't know, so it's always in the back of his mind. And those are Robert E. Howard stories. So I would again say it is part of his motivation, but not the central part of his motivation for a lot of what he does. I think it grows and grows within him as he gets older. Let's see. Scrolling down, I'm going to read Sound Engraver's statement, even though it is not a question, because I think it is something to do with a lot of this art. I love how the old cartoons framed men with very broad shoulders. Even the older, poorer men are pretty muscular. Glad you are reviving that with your new stories. Yes, indeed. This is one of the things you're going to see within my stories. Again, this is one of the things I talked about probably about 6-8 months ago on my Saturday videos about, it might have been even longer than that, about this, we'll say, I don't even know how to describe it, this way of looking at people when they draw them. These new artists from Marvel and DC, they're looking around at the people around them, and they're all a bunch of humped over, slouchy, non-manly people in several ways, and that's what they're portraying on the page for these characters, because that's all they see around them, and they think that's a normal person. It's not a normal person. I live out in the country. You should see some of these people. I mean, I'm not a small guy, but they tower over me, and their hands, when I go to shake their hands, make my hand feel like I'm a 3-foot woman. These guys are just breaking their backs and working, and becoming these kinds of burly men. So yeah, that's what a man is. Just to let you know. All right, scrolling down. Elijah says, RJ, are you familiar with the story of Aeneas? Yes, indeed. I love Aeneas, story of Aeneas. Actually, it is, I wouldn't say Virgil is not my go-to. I'm very much very much, I won't say a devotee, but very much someone who has read the Aeneid over and over again. But I would be more inclined to go back to Homer, and that those stories of Troy, because Aeneas, of course, is fleeing from Troy. He's one of the few Trojans that actually gets away, and he begins the new civilization upon what is basically going to become Rome. So just let me re-up this one more time. But yeah, very interesting story, and one that I am deeply familiar with. Again, read as a child. I read to me as a child. All these kinds of things. Um, a lot of people. I got contacted by someone who actually is the person who introduced me to John Z. Wright. I, names just elude me when I'm pressed for time, but uh, he was talking about, if I want to, have my son grow up to be one of these heroic individuals you're always talking about, What do you suggest I do? I said, read to them. Go find good literature like Homer, like Hesiod, like Virgil, like the old Robin Hood stories, the old King Arthur stories. Read to them. Um, and if you're religious, read the Bible to them as well, I would suggest. Um, because these are the stories that you want them to imitate, and when they're little kids, they're excited by what you're excited by, and if you're excited by these old stories, go find them, read them to your kids, because they will become excited with these stories through your excitement, and they will take these lessons onto themselves, these heroic ideals. So yeah, I would, and among those books that I would put in that pile would be Virgil. Indeed. There's some Virgil I wouldn't put in there. Just some of his, smaller things. But yeah, um, you know, I would put these stories in there. So scrolling down, and hopefully I'll get some more of these questions answered. Scrolling down. Da-da-da-da. Scrolling down. See if I can get any more questions. If you could just put a question mark at the end if you have a question of your question, that'd be great. Scrolling down. So there's a couple of things here, but I don't think they're for me. I think you're all speaking in the chat. So if I miss your question, I apologize. But if you want to put it back in the chat, if I miss it, go right ahead. Just make sure you put either tag me or put a question mark so that I can figure out that it is a question for me. Sound Engraver says, what are my expectations? No, what you experienced in college was definitely pervasive in the music and art colleges. This is why I have to put this on the main screen. My computer got a tiny little print on it unless I have to uh, get it up there on the main screen. So Sandra Graver says yes, that she has experienced what I experienced in university as well. Um, well, I'm great to see that I wasn't alone, because really at that time I felt like I was alone. Usually when I got into grad school, it turned into a lot. See, I was an undergrad for a long time because I did two undergrads. Um, Basically, the first one was history and classics. The second one was philosophy and political theory. So I did two degrees basically in undergraduate. Basically, thinking that I was going to become a teacher, but then when I took all of these courses, some of my professors and the people at the university pulled me aside and said, "No, you should not become a teacher. With all of these things under your belt, you should become a professor." So I went to graduate school for that, but really, the graduate school just turned me off of really wanting to ever become part of that world. But the thing was that in graduate school, since I had spent so much time in undergrad, it, because I went to an undergraduate, well, a couple of different undergraduate universities, and they were really small classes, and it wasn't a prestigious school by any means, but it was great because the students came first. Usually within the bigger, I found it, when you get into bigger universities, your students are coming like third or fourth in the line about what the professor wants to do. But in this university that I went to mainly for the undergraduate degrees, the students came first, and yeah, it was small class sizes. Our seminars were basically like 12 to 15 people. We always got to argue with the professor and with each other, and it was great. You learned how to argue, you learned how to communicate, you learned how to parse through all of these ideas and have yourself challenged. But when I went into the bigger university, and our seminars were 30 people, none of these people knew how to speak, let alone argue. It was the most ridiculous thing in the world, and it ended up half the time with me arguing with the professor, and it would just be him and I having an argument, and this would be the seminar class. Anyways, yeah. Uh, Again, I felt alone at a lot of times while bringing up these subjects within university. Just to let you know, Sound Engraver. Again, going off on a tangent. Let's see. Scrolling down. I think this is for me, so I will read it. I love that Howard story. Conan and crew are put before a judge. Conan listens patiently, realizes these people are insane, throws cards across the room, splits the judge's skull. That will be Queen of the Black Coast. uh, yes, that's how that story begins. Indeed. So again, that there right there is the tension that I was talking about that I try to capture within Crom the Destroyer, the tension between barbarism and civilization, because at some point, the simplicity of Conan, it's not even the barbarian part of him. It does come out as barbaric actions by, splitting the skull of the judge and all that kind of stuff. But it's just his simplicity in the fact that they have all these people speaking at him, telling him he's done something wrong when he can't even understand what they're saying. He's like, I don't understand what you're telling me or why I did something wrong. He has no clue. So, I mean, that innocence within Conan, you probably don't think of Conan as innocent most of the time. But yeah, he has an innocence to him, whereas he sees the threads of civilization and the good parts of it and the useless parts of it. And that's because of his simplicity in sometimes, again, within Queen of the Black Coast, that's right there for front and center at the first of the story. George says Primal season 1 and the beginning of season 2 was good, but in my opinion, it went woke in the end. Unfortunate. It did look like a good series. I didn't know if I'd ever get to watch it. But um, someone did bring up the very interesting idea that it's sort of set in a Robert E. Howard kind of world, because it seems like evolution works in the Robert E. Howard way. That is to say that people and things can evolve very quickly, and they can also devolve into basically primitive, if not ape-like creatures very quickly as well. So that's what sort of interested me about, excuse me, about all of that story, although I don't even know if I'll ever get to watch it. So scrolling down, scrolling down. Who's my favorite Batman writer? Tony has this question. Favorite Batman writer? I really don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't recall who would be my favorite Batman writer, but I would say that there are two runs of Batman which I would take as inspiration, and they would be first the Jim Aparo run, and prior to that, the Neil Adams run. And I don't know if it was Denny O'Neil writing at that time or not. Denny O'Neil, I know, wrote Batman much earlier than that. One of Denny O'Neil's stories, his Batman story, again, I'm talking about Don Chin and wanting him to write not a parody story, but a funny story in that old campy way of looking at superheroes, because we have Thomas Valiant, who is someone who can double for Plastic Man, although he's not the same. And you have Kit Fox, who can double as Batman, although he's not the same. Those are the two, not the two main characters, but two of the characters that are portrayed in this book. And what inspired me to want Don to actually write this for me was reading a Denny O'Neil Batman story from probably, would have been at the very, I don't know, the early 70s, maybe late 60s. But I just pulled it out. Actually, I pulled it out of the back stock at my local comic shop, and I said, I'm buying this. And I bought it, brought it home and read it. And I just laughed all the way through, because I don't remember. I think it was the Riddler was who he was going after at that time. And it was so funny. I mean, I could see where I never really enjoyed the DC Batman or any of the campy stories for when I was growing up, but I can see these things now. And sorry, I'll take that off. But yeah, again, Denny O'Neil very much has inspired some of the stuff that I'm writing right now, and that I'm producing right now. But whether or not he was the one writing with Jim Aparo, I don't know. I really like Jim Aparo's. Again, Neil Adams is great in a way. I think the stories fell down a little bit, but I think that the Jim Aparo stuff was probably where I cut my teeth on Batman. So I see if I can scroll up to where I was. Let's see if I can find where I was. There I am. Okay, back to the questions. There is Tony's question about Batman. So I'm not sure if I answered you, Tony, but I'm not sure I can answer that question because I can't think off the top of my head who the writer was at that time. Da, da, da. Scrolling down. Conan movies should have no CGI. It should be practical effects like the original movie. Completely agree, George. This is probably the reason why Momoa's Conan failed. Agreed. I mean, I again, I can't even remember what the storyline was for that movie. So I think that the story probably fell down as well. But yeah, CGI is not needed in a lot of these movies. So I just I want people to go back to old school, actually telling stories. Unfortunately, it looks like we're going to get a lot of CGI generated AI stuff in the future, which is just going to kill entertainment, except for the stuff like what I'm doing. Because I mean, I have people writing. I do have digital artists, but again, for Crom the Destroyer, they all go through at the end of the inker, who is Mike Gustovich, and he does stuff with paper and a brush, and he's old school. So you get that feel. I can't remember. There is an actual, I think it's a German word for it, where you have a painting and or a drawing, and you get to see what is basically smudge marks on the painting or drawing, which is the hand of the artist. And again, I can't remember what in the world. I think there is a either German or French word for that. But that's the kind of thing that you don't get anymore, especially with all this CGI stuff. You just don't get it. There was a great analysis of Vampire Hunter D, which brought up a very interesting point in the fact that this was one of the last great stories written and produced by hand, where you have things like the black that is so much in the background and in the story is black of a paintbrush on a physical piece of media instead of just blackness that you would get from a computer. And those are the kinds of things, the tangible. Even blackness has some tangibility to it. Yes, CGI doesn't have that tangibility to it. Let's see. uh Here we have another comment from Viking. I love that you are talking up the great and underappreciated mantle of Conan, making it your own and running with it. Conan was always one of my favorite literary figures. Well, I'm going to hopefully give everyone a character and a story that they can sink their teeth into and say, yeah, that is going back to, because I try to promote my book as being a return to form for low fantasy. And this is why, again, a lot of people tell me, my detractors, so I don't listen too much to some of these people, but they're always telling me, oh, you're just copying this, or you're just copying that. And I would say, yeah, this is my foray into actually getting things published. I'm going to copy the greats until the style emerges where I can see what people want right now and what parts of those old styles people still want and still are attracted to, because it's all about what the customer wants. And I want to do that. And that's what, again, that story that I'm getting published with Iron Age magazine is very much, I try to make it as much as possible as if you're reading a Robert E. Howard story. It's not my voice. It's a Robert E. Howard voice. So, I mean, that also brings back those old stories and return to form for those kinds of stories. I think that's what we need. All right, scrolling down. Let's see. I'm probably over my hour already, but I'm going to answer questions. Have you watched 1983 animated movie Fire and Ice? Yes, indeed. Actually, I do believe you can still watch that on YouTube for free. Someone uploaded it. I did notice probably about a year ago. I noticed that it was up there on YouTube. I don't know if it's still there. You can actually rent it on YouTube, but I think someone still has it up there. So just let everyone know in case they want to go check that out. But yes, actually, Fire and Ice is, again, one of the inspirations for the backup story world of Crom the Destroyer, which we won't get into in the first volume, which is the one that's coming out just next month or the end of this month. But I want to do Crom the Destroyer #2, which will touch on expanding the world, and it does have some hints of inspiration from Fire and Ice. Let's see now. Scrolling down, scrolling down. I want to see if there's any more questions. Oh, let me just stop right there for a second. Okay. With George's question. And I want to go over to, I said I wanted to show everyone this new piece of art. I'm just going to put this up in the background for a little bit. This is, again, Nick O'Reilly, or Jim O'Reilly. I get Nick Axe and Jim O'Reilly mixed up. So hold on one second. I'll put this up in the background for his new art that he forwarded to me. Let's see if I can get this up without actually, kicking myself off of the stream. I don't know if I can get it up. I don't know how in the world to do this. I wanted to show it to everybody tonight, but it doesn't seem to be happening for me, unfortunately. But I am showing this on my Twitter feed in case anyone wants to know the new art from that Jim is posting. Again, I got to figure this stuff out before I actually stream, because I hate leaving everybody in silence. So again, I'll just put the normal stuff back up, but I will be showing it again. I'll probably post some of it on my YouTube channel probably tomorrow as a community post as well. So that's new art from Jim O'Reilly. All right, I'll scroll back up to where I was and answer more questions. Unfortunately, I can't get that on the screen right at the moment, unless I remove myself from the stream, which I don't want to do that because that does not work well for me. I always kick myself off. All right, scrolling down to questions. Let's see. We have this statement here from Prometheus. Conan is a hero who embodies the traditional Western value of prudence, unlike most heroes like Spider-Man who embody justice. It's an interesting take on it. I never thought of it that way. Thank you very much. I profusely thank you for that comment. Because, yeah, that would explain a lot about Conan. I hadn't thought of it in those terms. But yes, to some extent, if you look at it through the backward lens of prudence. Now, I think that they tried to destroy this within the new series of Conan the Barbarian that Marvel had out just a couple of years ago when they redid the story. And there was something that irked me about that story. And you just put your finger on it right there. I had never thought of that. It's because of the fact that they had basically this woman who was creating a blood spell to try to reawaken this dark god. And she was using Conan for that in these new Marvel Conan stories. And the thing was that she was the source of all of the times that he got away from things where he should have died. That was the basic gist of the story, that all these old Conan stories where he just gets off by the skin of his teeth and allows him to survive, that was her sticking her hand in his life to make sure he didn't die so that he could continue what was basically a blood sacrifice to help reawaken this dark god. And that just irked me. I really did not like that part of the story. I thought it was an interesting take, but not something that I liked. And again, I think you just put your finger on it right there, because part of the byproduct of prudence, again, some of the older examiners of the values, the virtues, would say that you look at some of these extremely virtuous people and they would do what most people would consider an extremely ridiculous thing, and they would come through unscathed, and they couldn't understand why. And the reason why they would come out unscathed is because they were employing prudence. That is to say, I would say, and I've said this on my channel, prudence is like a very low level super power, quite honestly, that you can walk onto a battlefield and just walk straight through the battle and not get wounded. Why? Because if you're actually acting in a prudent way, which is correct decision making according to reality, you know all of the pitfalls that can occur and you sidestep them. So yeah, thank you very much for that comment. All right, I'm gonna see if I can speed myself up a little bit. So scrolling down, let's see, scrolling down to see if I got any more questions. To do. So Robert says, I have collected works of Howard. I need to sit down and read them. If you honestly, uh, Robert, if you don't have the time to sit down and read them, but you're stuck at a computer um, for, many hours of the day, or you're able to do things where you can listen to them, there's a great YouTube channel called The Cybrarian. And he has most of the stories up there. And he does a really good job of portraying some of the sound effects, not overly much, and giving voice to some of these characters. He uses a lot of things over and over again, but still, if you want to do it that way, again, it won't be the same as reading it, but at the very least, it'll give you um, time to think about those stories. So scrolling down, da-da. Sound Engraver says, again, I gotta click this on. I think in one of your videos you expressed you were moving between the superhero genre and fantasy. Do you find yourself now more inclined to fantasy? I find change in creative direction normal. I find that as well. I was writing, so I had to rewrite the second chapter for Crom the Destroyer, because again, the original plan was to have Jim O'Reilly do all the art, but Jim has had to move a lot over the last couple of months to year. So I've given the second chapter of the story to Nick Axe, the person who did some of the art that you're looking at in the background, because he does the cover, and the Demon Woman stuff, that's his. Again, it's all going to be tied together by Mike Gustavich's inking. But yeah, I rewrote the story, the second chapter of the story, more in a way that Nick would be used to for the script. And I just ran with it. It was so beautiful to just steep myself in that story. And I wanted to continue to write nothing but fantasy, but then I had to stop and um, flush out Thomas Valiant #2, Chapter 1, which Renzo is starting with right now, within the next little bit. And now that I'm writing Thomas Valiant #2, again, the superhero stuff just reinvigorated me for the superhero stuff. As in, when I'm working, I'm one of those people where out of sight, out of mind, and I need to work in order for me to want to work. The more I work, the more I want to work. I know that's probably strange for some people to hear, but I would consider, a lot of people knock me in the head and say, no, you're not lazy. I would consider myself lazy to some extent, in the fact that I don't want to do things, but when I start to do them and I see results, I just want to do them. I want to work. As soon as I start to work and get some results, I want to work more, and I want to work more, and I want to work more. So much so that I don't eat, I don't get proper sleep, and a lot of these things, I just want to write. So anyway, scrolling. So yeah, creative, and I think the switch between the two gives me a Sound Engraver very much a creative. I don't know what you'd call it, not license, but the ability to refresh myself in order to keep going at that pace, because I write in bursts most of the time. When I can't write in bursts, I just write dialogue, or I write panels and things like that, and then I connect them all together. So it gives me a refresher. Scrolling down. Oh, here's a good comment, I think. It amazes me that today's artists draw overweight heroes. If you spent all day running, flying, fighting, that is massive cardio. That is why 90s and below, that is why 90s and below superheroes should be drawn as Greek gods. Uh, well, yes and no. I would say more Greek gods towards the DC within the Marvel. I find that in the DC, or sorry, in the Marvel, especially within early and even into the early 80s of Spider-Man, and characters like Havoc, they had a very fit and toned form, but it wasn't quite the Greek god form. It was very much a I'm a really toned normal individual, not like the giant everybody's half Conan, which you see right now in some of the Superman and Batman stuff. I like the Jim Aparo Batman, where he was slim and slender to some extent, although he still had muscles underneath that suit that you didn't want to mess with. So yeah, I agree, but again, there has to be some limit to it. That I think that a lot of these people that are trying to do the Greek god thing right now within Marvel and DC artists, they're just not putting it in the right direction. It works with Conan, it doesn't work with Batman to that extent. All right, scrolling down. What are your thoughts? Let's see. Tony has a question, and I don't have thoughts on this because I'm not entirely sure. Oh, okay. Um, Brian McMorrin. I don't remember that story off the top of my head. So he's asking me what are my thoughts on one of Howard's stories, and I can't for the life of me pull up what in the world that story is about. So it's been a long time since I've read some of these stories, a long time. So I couldn't, off the top of my head, answer that question, quite honestly. I'll see if I can get through the last of the questions because I am running very late. I usually only like to be up for an hour with my streams, so I don't cause everybody to just drop away within not actually paying attention anymore because I'm droning on so much. Where was I? Scrolling down, scrolling down. Let's see. Yes, sound engraver, 12 to 15 students not in the undergrad class. It was sometimes the higher classes, yeah, but that would be the seminar classes. But I mean, at the same time, when I took ancient Greek, there was 2 people in the class, and our professor was the president of the university, who was a classics professor. So yeah, it was a small university, and yeah, by the time we got into the upper level political theory, it was 15 people in a class. Yeah, stuff like that. So scrolling down. Okay, Elijah says, I see RJ there, so I'm going to assume it's a question for me. I remember years ago you made a video about Aquaman. I recall you saying how Atlantis is historical rather than mythological. Do you think Hyboria is historical? No, Robert E. Howard says basically this is his made up world. He basically comes out and says it. He says this is not the real world. There is he takes what he does. This is my take on how Robert E. Howard created his world. He takes all the great European civilizations and he smashes them into one European board, one European map. And he does that by expanding the map to some extent, of course, so that a lot of what is now sea or ocean is land at the same time. So, like England and the, I don't know what was it was Hibernia that was the Roman word um, for Ireland, if I remember correctly. So yeah, that's what he did. So he took, the ancient Romans and he stuck them in Corinthia. He took the medieval French. He stuck them in Aquilonia. He took the Picts, and to some extent, he describes the Picts of Scotland, but at the same time, they're also American Indians. And again, of course, you have the Stygians, who are the Egyptians at their height. You have all of these great civilizations that he takes them at their height and puts them all together down the board. So it's a work of fiction. He declared, yes, this is not historical. This is a work of fiction. Although, again, yes, the stories of Atlantis, if you go back to Plato, again, they're told as if they were real. So, there is that. So and he uses that. Howard does use that. And so he uses the bookends of actual real things, which is what I'm using as well. He starts between the ages of the fall of Atlantis and the rise of the sons of Arius. So the fall of Atlantis is recorded in the works of Plato as being something that was real, and you have the sons of Arius. Again, that's something that's historical. So he's taking those two bookends of history and making a intervening time of this great civilization. So I don't think it's real. No, I think it's playing off of history in many different ways that does actually give some realistic qualities to it, which is what I'm always saying. A good story does representation of reality. So, okay, let's see. Scrolling down. I got to catch up here. I'm going to only answer questions that have question marks. Hopefully, anyways. Scrolling down because people are talking to each other. I'm great to see everybody having a good time in the comments. Scrolling down. Let's see if I have any more questions for me. Prometheus says, love Vampire Hunter D. Yes, indeed. It is, I would say, the best piece of anime, bar none, is Vampire Hunter D. Let's see, scrolling down. Let's see. Again, hate to give you dead air, but I'm just reading comments. Little John says, what's up, RJ? I'm working away trying to promote CROM the Destroyer. And that's what this stream is all about. So that's what's up. Scrolling down. I think someone's talking about Ninja Scroll, but not to me. I'd love to get into that conversation, but not tonight. All right, scrolling down. See if there's any more questions for me. I think you all are having a great chat about things in the comments. Scrolling down. Darn thing just jumped to me again. Just give me 1 second. Oh, someone's talking about the prototypes of He-Man. Actually, He-Man was, if I remember correctly, supposed to be a Conan story. It was basically a Conan story mixed with a Kull story. That's why you got Skeletor, because he's Thulsa Doom? Not Thulsa Doom. Is it Thulsa Doom? From who is the main antagonist for Kull, who's a skeleton, right? So if I remember correctly, that's where that came from. So He-Man, again, is a combination of Conan and Kull, and Skeletor is basically a ripoff of Thulsa Doom, the original from the Kull stories. Scrolling down, and basically they found that we can't sell this to kids. We got to make it a little more light. That's the story that I've always been told and have viewed He-Man through. So scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down, see if there's any more questions for me. Questions that are going for everybody else in the chat, which again, I'm glad to see. You're all having a great time talking to each other. I think I've gotten to the bottom of the chat. So, I want to ask a question to Sound Engraver. Hopefully you all won't mind this. Sound Engraver, I just watched a video the other day, and it's YouTube. So the science that you're going to find on there is quote unquote science. You never know whether these things are actually real or not. That's why I always do my research. But I just came across this, and there was someone who did a study apparently talking about the fact that the notes and the rhythm within rock and roll don't match. And when they exposed animals to this, it actually degraded their mental abilities. Because basically those two things, I'm not a music person, so I don't even pretend to um, to understand what they're talking about with the difference between the notes and the rhythm. But anyways, I found it fascinating, if it is true, that rock and roll actually, has that effect on the cognitive abilities of animals. But anyway, so I've gotten to the end of the chat. I am going to just talk a couple more minutes about CROM the Destroyer and then play the second trailer for CROM, and just let everyone know again. I want to give a shout out to all my artists. Nick O'Reilly, or sorry, I always keep putting them together. Jim O'Reilly, Nick Axe, Mike Gostovich, who are the three main artists for this book. We have a number of others doing pinups. And we are going to be opening the campaign on the last day of this month, which is the 30th of June, so that it is open for what's basically the 4th of July weekend, so that everyone can, have their paycheck on Friday. So if you want to buy CROM, it'll be up all weekend and you'll be able to, take your time and hopefully everyone has a nice long weekend and your bosses are generous enough to give you the Monday and the Tuesday off as well for the 4th of July, just because to celebrate the 4th. Anyways, so you'll have all weekend to pick up CROM the Destroyer. If you sign up on the early bird page, the link for the early bird page is in the description of this video. If you sign up on the early bird page, you get a reminder email when we go live, just in case you need that. And you will get a free exclusive pinup poster with your order. It is exclusive because it is only available to the people who actually sign up early. It is not available for sale with the campaign itself. So that's the only chance you're going to get that poster. And again, I always like to add perks and little things to my campaigns for people who sign up early, because I appreciate that so much. Usually it is the opening day and the closing day that are the most important. Again, that sign up page is extremely important as well, so that I can contact everyone and say, hey, we're open. There's that. And I also want to let everyone know once again that Iron Age magazine has accepted one of my stories for CROM the Destroyer, which again it's a text story. So that will be in Iron Age magazine #2, which is their next campaign. So something to look forward to if you're appreciating this return to low fantasy, which is CROM the Destroyer. And I will be showing more of the art as we get closer and closer to the launch date on both my Twitter, which is RJ of the Island, by the way. That's my Twitter handle. And on the community section of my YouTube channel. Again, I will be talking about it a little bit as well on my normal Saturday videos that I do. So CROM the Destroyer is a return to low fantasy. It is a story that is reinvigorating Robert E. Howard, I'd say, mashup of a lot of his different characters, which would be Conan, Kull, and Solomon Kane. So I want to go back to the original material that inspired him and write a character that is very much like that inspiration that he got to write again, because Conan is a reinterpretation of Kull itself, because he found it sold better. But anyways, if you like those old stories of Robert E. Howard, if you like Kull stories or Conan stories or Solomon Kane stories, then this book is for you. So I thank everyone again for showing up, and I will give you the outro let me go to the comments just one more time, just to make sure everyone else. Okay, so no more questions. That's great. I will give you the outro of the second trailer for CROM the Destroyer. It's very much someone had commented to me saying it's very grindhouse. I want to leave you with this and say thank you once again to everyone who came and showed up for this live stream. I will be doing a live stream either on a Wednesday or a Thursday evening until we open the campaign, and possibly during the campaign as well. So, all right, I'll see y'all later. Thanks for being here. Bye.
No matter how many wars you fight, no matter how much blood you shed, no matter how much rage you loose, no matter how many demons you face, no matter how many companions you lose, no matter if our kingdom falls, I know that you will return to me in honor.